1400. And this morning, so this morning, once again, my name is Wayne Rowe, and assisting me with the presentation this morning will be Jay Huff. Jay's so proud of it. So a couple of things that we'd like for you to gain knowledge of in this particular presentation is to have gain knowledge on some of the changes in the standard, and Jay and I are going to go specifically just the changes, not the entire standard. We want you to become a more knowledgeable co-show and not really a crane inspector. And then also we'd like for you to have a better understanding of some of the requirements that are now going to be implemented for the crane operators and the riggers in Jay. So once again, the new rule is implemented now as of April 15th of this year, and we have until November sometime in November of 2014 for the rule to be actually totally implemented. From my understanding, most of the real reputable crane operators have already embraced the rule and are well under their way of implementing it. Once again, we'll show you a couple of slides today on different types of equipment. And once again, we're just trying to increase your awareness about various pieces of equipment and cranes and how they are operated. One of the key parts of the new rule is that now riggers and operators are going to have to be qualified, and they're going to have to go through legitimate training, very specific type of training, and they'll be issued certifications and or cards that indicate that they've been properly trained. The signal, I've heard the signal. I'm sorry, riggers. Signal. Thank you. One of the definitions of the new rule is going to specifically talk about when the crane is being assembled, someone needs to be present that knows the engineering components and standards of how to assemble and disassemble the crane. This is a photo here where, on this particular photo, this fellow right here in the brown jacket is actually the guy that's in charge. He's the person that's in charge of assembly of this particular crane. And you'll see we have a few more slides where everyone keeps coming to him. He's the one that's instructing the crew on the specifics of when various components are put in place for the assembly of this crane. Something that's also very specific in the rule is what the ground conditions are before someone starts to assemble a crane. And now if it's going to be on soil, it's going to have to be a lot of work done as far as preliminary work done as far as what are the soil conditions and or what type of blocking to support the load of the crane once the crane is in operation. And these are a few photos of some setups that didn't go very well. Take note on this particular one, how this was in earth, and once the crane had a load on it, the foot pad just sunk right down in the soil, which is not going to be acceptable. That's what will lead to the toppling of the crane in many cases. The standard is going to also address doing the assembly and disassembly some more stringent inspection criteria for the pins, which is the components that are used to assemble the booms and the boom to the crane. There's going to need to be more non-destructive type of testing done on the components before they, in between each use. Whereas in the past it may have been that we assemble a crane, disassemble a crane, take all the components, go to another site, and do it all over again. Whereas now there's going to be, once again, a more stringent inspection, non-destructive testing type of inspection on the components. And this is an example of two different types of bolts, nuts and bolts, and pins that are used to assemble cranes and booms. Once again, the new component in the standard talks talks about how the person who is in charge of the assembly and disassembly has to go to school now. They're going to have to understand engineering, calculation, and they're going to have to be able to clearly understand drawings from the person that designed the crane and the sequence of assembly and disassembly. And this is a key statement here. Employees should never be under the boom unless there are certain requirements that are specified in the standard under 1404 F2. And we actually had a fatality some years ago. Bobby Trice investigated a fatality here in the Richmond area where there was a fatality doing the disassembly of the crane. This is a good photo of showing once again, here's our guy right here that is directing the assembly and disassembly of the cranes. And take note, on this particular job site, there's some blocking here, which is where this boom is going to be placed in order to keep it upright and in order to have it more stable while they're installing the pins on this boom. This is a photo of one of the fellows who's actually getting ready to install the pin into the boom. It's connected to boom section, and here is the pin on the ladder right behind him. He was using the ladder properly to get ready to install these pins. And these are photos of him actually installing the pins within the assembly of the boom. And take note that he's not using hammers, he's not pounding and beating. Everything is perfectly aligned just like it's supposed to be, such that the pin slips right in. And once again, it's one of the key reasons why it's so perfectly aligned is because the blocking that was placed on the ground prior to them placing the boom in place. And once again, this photo is showing this blocking in place, and he's still supported up above. But most of the weight load was on the blocking. Once again, here's our guy that's doing the assembly, in charge of directing the assembly. And then the standard also really addresses a lot of criteria now about distance within power lines, both doing the assembly and disassembly. And this is just a photo. This photo is really what it's indicating. It's that these power lines have been taken out of service while this boom is within a working distance of the flags on here indicate that the power line's been taken out of service. The new standard is going to break down various distances from various voltage, power lines rated at various voltages. Thanks to Teresa Brookman, I want to take note of this reference here on this link on this website. This is a really good website where it will show there's some fellows down in Beaumont, Texas, and have invented these insulator devices that can now be used for both when the load is being hoisted. There's an insulating device that can be placed somewhere below the hook and in between the hook and the load. And then also they have an insulating device now that they can install on the tag line. And this device is installed on the tag line very close to the fella that's holding onto the tag line. So anyway, they have a little video that's associated with their product. It's pretty interesting. Once again, with the new standard, anytime someone's going to be operating crane equipment around a power line that's 350 kV or larger, especially on some of the high lines such as this one, this is going to be over 1,000 kVs. Minimum clearance distance is to be determined by the owner or qualified registered engineer. So when you get into these high voltages and you see some repair work being done on these major power lines that are usually associated with some grids, then it's not going to, you're going to have a conversation really with the owner of the grid as well as the owner of the equipment to make sure that they both are on the same page of what the acceptable distance is from these power lines. And it's not just acceptable that the power line has been de-energized, so we're good to go. what you want to hear them also say is that it's been de-energized and that we are taking precautions because there's residual energy still in the power lines, still in the insulator. And so even though they say we're de-energized, this high line is dead, we've got it locked down, all that kind of criteria, you still want to see them wearing protective equipment because of the residual energy.
How long will it stay in a high voltage line like that?
Depending on the line, the diameter of the wire, how many coils in the wire, as well as the component of the insulator.
Can it be days?
Yes. Just think of it as a capacitor, and it's got it stored in there until it's all released out. So the power line standard really references what's known as Table 8. And in this table in the new standard, once again, it goes through a lot of different criteria, with different voltage, different types of equipment, and the components involved. And then here in Virginia, we have the Virginia High Voltage Line Safety Act. And it's my understanding that it's currently being rewritten to conform more to this new Cranes and Derricks standard. And so that act, plan, do we have a target date on when that's going to be in? Anyway, the Virginia High Voltage Standard is being rewritten to where the tables will coincide with the new table A of the standard. Some of the other, once again, new criteria that are a little more stringent with the assembly and disassembly of cranes is that they're going to have to be documented inspections, both for the post-assembly, the daily use of the crane, a monthly check if the crane is working more than a week, and then an annual annual documentation of inspection of some of the components. And once again, pins, holding devices, connecting devices are now high on the list for a more stringent inspection and documenting that they've been inspected. This is an example of two different types of reels that are containing some wires that are used to operate the cranes. This one here in the blue slide is actually the wires or ropes for a drum, which is operating the load, lifting the load. The other one here is the end of the crane, which is called the block, and it's showing the sheath and various wires here running through the sheaths. On the sheaths, one thing that needs to be inspected that is real high on the list of inspection items is that the sheaths, the top of the sheath, need not to be scored. It needs to be perfectly, no break points there that might infringe or rub on the wires that would impact the integrity of the wires. That definitely needs to be inspected every day before the crane is operating. This slide shows that there are various components, safety features that are within a crane. On a smaller crane, you'll have a scale that shows what the lifting angle is, which is where they also have to do the calculations for the load lift. Center slide shows a little bit more sophisticated type of component that is now in the cab of the crane, where the crane operator is digitally reading what the angle of his boom is and the operating distance. This slide right here shows a component which is called the two-block, and the purpose of the two-block is if in the event that the boom is extended way out and they're doing a lift, a lot of lifts up and down, sometimes the crane operator might go to look where his block is in relation to the end of his boom. The anti-two-block will actually shut down the operation of the boom if and when the block gets too close to these sheaths. Which end result would be, if you didn't have the anti-two-block, you'd have your possibility of the wires coming off of the sheaths, and your load would be suspended way up in the air because the wires would be jammed. We'd be able to lower the load. Something else that's new, and it's kind of new in the standard, it's been around in some construction sites, is that anyone has the opportunity to stop the operation of the crane if and when they see an unsafe condition or act. In some areas, in some of the bigger job sites, especially some of these parking lots that have been built lately, where there's a lot of big lifting going on, the crane operator is pretty far away from where the load is actually being delivered and initially being lifted. A lot of times, that lift is being communicated via radio, not via hand signals. So in between the guy that's got the radio on telling the crane operator to begin to lift, and on the crane operator cab is not in the clear line of sight. If anyone sees a condition or an act that they deem to be unsafe, then once again, they have the opportunity to stop it. Get in line of sight of the crane operator, get his attention to get him to stop the movement of the crane. This is an example of some fellas who are getting ready to do some rigging, and you'll note that this guy right here is giving his hand signal. He's doing a good job of it in that his hands are fully extended, his arms are fully extended away from his body, so that it's a good, clear line of sight for the crane operator. And it's very easy to understand where his signals are. And there are some construction sites now where the fellow who is deemed as the signal fellow will actually have a different color glove, a little bit more high visibility type. And on this particular job site, there were several of the fellas who were given signals. This is just an example. This was a video of one of the fellas doing some rigging before they did the lift. This is an example of the cord that can be used for the training of the signal person. Pretty much going to be a standard. 6 or 12 different types of signals that one is to use. This slide here shows an example of fall protection that is now required for assembly and disassembly. Of course, this is pretty obvious why you would be using fall protection on this particular job site. However, I guess the question is going to be is when you have a job site similar to the ones that we were showing earlier, when does one really need to start wearing fall protection to assembling and disassembling the booms? And once again, the answer to that question is to be determined when they're doing this pre-assembly and disassembly protocol. So anytime one gets underneath a load, they're always supposed to have head protection, even on a residential construction site such as this one. Guy he's not really wearing head protection. It's a cold day, that's what he's protecting, it's his head. Cold is not really from the impact of the load overhead. In this particular job site, they were not using tag lines. This photo shows that when one is doing what's called a free falling of a load, this is an example of what a friction brake would look like inside the cab, which is where they would lift up a load, and then they're going to bring it back down, and it's going to be a slow, tight fit of the load, so they could do what's called friction falling to slowly get it in place. This is an example of one of the older types of cranes. Once again, the new criteria or the new standard is going to call for everyone being qualified. So when you do crane inspections or on a construction site, anyone operating a crane needs to start showing your card similar to what the forklift standard, the industrial power truck standard. And the same thing with the signal person. They're going to need to have some cards.
They don't certify the riggers like the signalmen because every job's different. I mean, you could be certified. I mean, you're qualified to rig purlins on a metal building, but that doesn't mean you're qualified to rig a multi-lift pick. You pick up half a cotton seat house or something. So signal is pretty much standard across the industry, so they certify them. But you just got to make sure your riggers are competent and qualified. The employer has to assess it because you might be qualified, like I said, for purlins, but you're not qualified for multi-lifts or big machine or anything. So there's no certification that you can carry from job to job because it might, the jobs are different.
Yeah, right. It's rated on equipment.
Right. If just because you got a card doesn't mean you're qualified for your job. You might be perfectly qualified on the floor building, but way out of your league on big heavy machinery.
Or if someone on the job site needs to be able to show you in good faith that there was some sort of training criteria, and what he is and is not qualified, right?
They just still have to provide a certification like the city. That's portable. The city card is portable to different jobs with the same employer.
Yeah. But bear in mind, just because you visit a construction site and one piece of equipment that is doing a certain type of lifting, once that job is finished, a week later, you'll still have the same, perhaps same riggers on the job site, different crane operators. So their training needs to go with them. Something new in the standard is that there's now a limitation, at least as far as my understanding, it's even lower, that if one is hoisted in a personnel basket, the wind speeds need to be 20 miles per hour at maximum, which sometimes may be difficult to calculate once again. Like on this particular photo, this fellow is probably 75 feet up in the air. So the wind speeds up above would be much different than the wind speeds at ground level when you're doing the inspections. Some of the bigger cranes, when they're doing high lift, especially aerial lifting, there'll be a little wind speed indicator at the very top of the boom. And so that's how the crane operator is to know what the wind speed is calculated around the personnel basket.
Doesn't mean they have to stop at 20 miles an hour. It just means they must do an assessment at 20 miles an hour. But then somebody, a competent person should be making a competent assessment. Of course, if you get number 20, you probably need to stop. But it doesn't mean they have to stop. If the crane says they can work and that they can do it safely, then it's not necessarily a violation just because you're above 20 miles an hour. 20 miles an hour, you must make an assessment. For personnel, it doesn't require it. For just general lifting, you're just supposed to have a competent person out there assessing it and following the manufacturer's recommendations for wind speed.
Right, if you think about it, with a 20-mile-an-hour wind gust, with this particular job site, if the basket got pushed into these antennas, it actually could get hung up. And then what? How do you do the rescue? How do you get the personnel basket down? And the new standard does address the tower cranes. I think this is a pretty good photo. There's some new criteria once again with the documentation that's required with the assembly and disassembly of tower cranes and some of the paperwork that's going to be associated with it. I think once again with these tower cranes, one of the biggest changes in the new standard once again is just imagine all of the pins and the components that are required to do the assembly and holding these booms and structures in place. Once again, that non-destructive testing of those pins is a big criteria for the standard. So that completes our presentation. Any questions? Yes?
Not so much a question, it's more of a comment, but you're also going to have to watch out for some of these smaller service companies. I was there a couple of weeks ago and did a company that installs signs. So they were already looking at the new standard, trying to figure out how it's going to pertain to them. So I think your big construction companies will probably do well, but some of these smaller little companies that are out there doing ancillary type construction work, where you're going to find the problems.
Yes. Excellent point. I did an inspection recently where a tree service bucket operation, and they had ordered some services from a chiropractor, so they were repairing his commercial sign out front with their tree service, articulating boom bucket, and he had no idea what was required under the new standard. Yes.
Yeah, on the crane operator's license, will it list individually what type of crane he's authorized to operate, or is there generic?
Yes. I'll answer that one, yes. Whether it's a small or large hydraulic or lattice boom track cranes, yes, it will identify, especially CCO will have specific on the back of their cars. Because if they're allowed to operate the small ones, that's all they're allowed to operate.
Yes, Jim?
If you're using an excavator to lift stuff, you're not using it as an excavator at all, for instance, you're laying pipe, and you're using your excavator to, you've got a hook attached to the bucket and chain, you put the pipe in, does that fall under the standard?
No. It's excluded, I think. It's, forklifts are excluded unless they have a hook. Or if you're free rigging, you don't follow the crane standard, but then you got problems with free rigging. But as soon as they put one of the attachments on it to get out of free rigging, and it has a hook, then they're under standard. But excavators and backhoes are excluded, and I think trucks delivering material to the jobs are excluded unless they use that crane to set the material. If they're unloading sheetrock into the building, it's okay. If they take that same apparatus and hang a brick on with it, then they're under standard.
And building on what Jim was pointing out, I have seen recently, especially with some of the renovating of the infrastructure, potable water systems within communities, there are a lot of construction sites using an excavator with buckets. And then on the backside of the bucket, there's the loop where they're attaching the chains and doing the excavating, and they turn around and hoist the pipe in place. So they're excluded.
Right, the excavator's backwards, even if they have hooks on it. But when you put a hook attachment on a forklift, then it's included. It's all, it discusses all that in the register, whatever. You can, in preamble, whatever. It tells what's excluded and what's not. Several things. And like cranes used in logging and or tree service, I think are excluded. I think they're general use still.
Any other questions? Very good. Well, thank you very much.